Hey guys, thanks for checking the video out. Today I want to take a look at stereo versus dual mono. Now this is in Logic Pro, but this is present in a few different DAWs. I know Pro Tools has this as like multiple mono, multi-channel plugins. I really want to take a look at when you should use dual mono and when you should use stereo, because it's in the menu when you have a stereo track and it's kind of a little bit confusing. It gives you the option between doing the two, and is dual mono really different than stereo? Let's take a look. So first off, I've just got a track here that I've just thrown together. Sounds like garbage, but it works for this kind of scenario. We've got a kick and a snare, and we've got a synth. Now, importantly, the kick and the snare are panned over to the left-hand side, and the synth is panned to the right-hand side. Let's take a listen to this. No compression, no anything, just completely dry. Okay, so we've got some stereo separation there. What I've got in the mixer is, as well as going to the main stereo output, I've got all these synths and kick and snare going to bus 15 and bus 16. Now, bus 15 is my stereo bus with a stereo instance of a compressor on it. And bus 16 is the same kind of thing. It's got the same compression settings, but it's got a dual mono compressor on it. Let's just take a listen to both of them one after the other. You're going to hear the difference, but then we're going to discuss the difference. So as you heard in the dual mono version, the synth was a lot louder in that right-hand channel, and that's because of this dual mono compression. So let's take a look at stereo compression first. Now, a stereo compressor is essentially two channels of compression, left and right, but those two channels are linked. So if something happens in the left-hand side, which breaches the threshold, it's going to compress that left-hand side. But crucially, it's also going to compress the right-hand side. So no matter which channel the breaching audio comes from, it's going to compress both sides. So you'll see in this compressor, it's pretty heavy. So I've got a ratio 6.6 to 1, a very, very fast attack. Release is very, very slow, 3 seconds. So you'll hear that when this kick and snare hits, it's going to breach the threshold and it's going to compress the kick and snare, but it's also compressing the right-hand side as well. Take a listen. So you can hear that synth kind of ducking down a touch. But is it different in the dual mono? Well, yes, it is. Let's have a look at that. So in the dual mono, we have the same settings, but if we press play, we're not going to hear that ducking effect in the right-hand side in the synth. It's only going to compress the kick and snare. Okay, so there's a couple of things to look at here. In the dual mono compressor, we can deal with the left-hand side, the right-hand side, or we can couple them. So at the moment, I'm just viewing the left-hand side, but the right-hand side is exactly the same. When we've got this couple switch engaged, then it's not adding any different compressor settings to the left or right. It's just having the exact same thing. So it's kind of joining them. You can think of a dual mono compressor as two separate compressors. One is on the left-hand side, one is on the right-hand side. They're not talking to each other, they're just listening to different sides of the same signal. So the compressor that's on the right-hand side, if something breaches in the left-hand side, it goes beyond that threshold, it doesn't care. It can't understand what's going on in that compressor, so it's just business as usual. But in the stereo compressor, both of those sides are interlinked. So when something happens in the left-hand side that goes above the threshold, the right-hand side is going to be compressed as well. So with that knowledge, let's take a listen again and hear exactly what's going on with stereo versus dual mono. So there you have it, two different ways of kind of thinking of stereo. In stereo, the typical stereo, you've got two linked channels. So if something happens in the left channel, that compressor is going to be compressing the right channel as well. In dual mono, they are separate. If something happens in the left-hand side, that's of no consequence to what's happening in the right-hand side, if it's hard panned and just in that one side as opposed to the other. So stereo will deal with both sides combined, both sides at the same time, dual mono will consider each side separately. So when is this actually useful? When should you use one as opposed to the other? Well, stereo will, it sounds like a contradiction in terms, but stereo will be a little more mono than dual mono. I'll explain what I mean. In stereo, the reason that it sounds stereo is because of the difference between the left and right. If you have exactly the same signal in the left as you have in the right, it sounds mono. It comes from the center. If you have something different, then that becomes more stereo. That sounds wider. That's how our ears hear things. So if you've got something compressing in dual mono, you've got a little more separation because there's a little more difference in the left or the right. If something's compressing in the left-hand channel, it's not necessarily compressing in the right-hand channel as well. So that's going to be a little bit wider. It's going to sound a little bit different. In stereo, it's just going to take into consideration both channels at the same time. So is stereo better than dual mono? No. Is dual mono better than stereo? No. They're just different. If you've got something that's really massive in the left-hand channel and you don't want the right-hand channel to compress at the same time, you should use dual mono. If you want both sides to be kind of coherent, cohesive in the kind of compression mix, as it were, then stereo is probably going to be better for you. If you want both channels to be compressed the same, use stereo. If you want them to be compressed differently, dual mono is probably the one for you. Now you know what the difference is, you know how to use them. Go and check out in your mixes when you should use them. I'll see you again soon. Take care.